My name's Tom Leone. I'm Chairman of the Public Works Committee and calling the meeting to order at 6:55 p.m. on Tuesday, July 7th, 2020 at 6:55. With that, if we just go around the room, people can introduce themselves.
Scott Kellogg, Alderman.
Dean Veneman, Alderperson and committee member.
Joe Terry, Director of Public Works.
Joe Eichstead, City Engineer.
Okay, item number 2 is a review of the DPW report.
So given the time of day, unless there's questions about the report, I'll just submit it and get it posted on the website, unless, I mean, I have some highlights if you want to hear them, but otherwise, if you have any questions, I'd be glad to entertain those.
It's fine with me if there's a couple that you wanted to touch on real quick, Joe, but...
I'll touch on a couple then. Looking at buildings and grounds, we are spending a significant amount of time with mowing equipment on a daily basis. If you haven't been down to the zoo, the bear pen enclosure is complete, and our staff designed and built that, and it turned out really excellent. In the engineering department, we are still working short-staffed. We've had a vacancy here for some time, and so to date, we haven't had any luck recruiting someone that we want to join the department. We continue that effort. Just to point out, we did have 234 Diggers Hotline locates for the last month, and that does keep one of our staff members occupied pretty much full-time. Our 2020 construction projects are underway. The details of those projects are listed in the report, and just as a reminder, the engineering department does post our construction project updates weekly on the city's website in the engineering section. In the streets area, we have promoted a internal candidate to street supervisor. That has been vacant for months, so that's we've needed leadership in that area, and so we're excited about that. Also, in preparation of a retirement of our buildings and park supervisor, we also have a promotion, an internal promotion for that as well, and so we will be advertising for general labor to replace those two employees. On construction, a number of our projects are complete. 10th Street is complete. The Centralia Center project is complete. Chase is complete. The East Grand Avenue project, we've wrapped up a few of the items that the city was responsible for. Our Second Avenue project, we have completed the underground, and we've been preparing grade for asphalt surface, concrete curb and gutters and driveways were starting to be poured today, and we just started on Washington Street, which is our last big project for the year, and that is our biggest project of the year. Under street maintenance, you'll notice if you go through that, there was a lot of work done again this month. One of the highlights is working with Wood County to install paver patches. We installed about 175 tons of asphalt. Did a number of 1,300 square yards of roadway at State Trunk Highway 34 and Wilson Street, a number of catch basins and other maintenance activities. Something that occupied the month considerably, as you can imagine, is Aquatics. I led 12 tours of the facility, worked with the fire department, police department, staff, residents, and media to get folks familiar with the facility. We did present a partnership opportunity at the Village of Port Edwards request, and also attended a pre-construction meeting on the 2nd Avenue South and Seneca Road DOT safety project. That project was scheduled to start yesterday. Charter Communications, however, although they were notified a year ago to have their cable line relocated, it has not been relocated, and it looks like it's going to be several weeks yet before they will relocate it. That project is being administered completely by the DOT, and so they'll be keeping us apprised of the construction schedule there, and we will be informing and working with the neighboring community in Port Edwards to keep them up to speed on that schedule too. Everything else in the report will be posted online here within the next day or two. So if you do have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you, Joe. Any questions by anybody? Scott?
Basically a comment. I just want to compliment Joe and his staff. I mean, when you talk about developing, building, and starting an aquatic center of that size, it's a major undertaking for a city of this size. I mean, it's unbelievable. So, I mean, I think we take it for granted somewhat of the work that went in. And I'm sure, you know, being over there, making sure everything is progressing the way they should be progressing and so forth is a major undertaking. I think the council needs to express their appreciation. Thanks.
You bet. I would like to recognize too, just staff in general for that. I mean, in a way, we were blessed in a way because we aren't doing as much rec programming, but it was an enormous amount of work to prepare our operations manual. You know, this facility is obviously something very different than what the city's experienced operating before. We're into day 2, and it's been very busy. And all while this project's been going on, the rest of the Public Works Department and all the staff still have their regular jobs to perform. You know, we are requesting, I am requesting consideration for staff for a lot of the landscaping and maintenance work at that facility, as well as all the new landscaping throughout the city. That's something that has been discussed with the mayor. But to date, we've been doing all of this with the staff that we have. And so we're trying to make compromises where it's not real noticeable. But I will say it's a challenge, and staff has been working very rigorously from supervisory staff to hourly staff to try to keep up and serve the community. So I appreciate that acknowledgement.
Thank you.
Excuse me, are there any, looking at the partnership opportunity with the Village of Port Edwards, so that's just a presentation at that point?
That was a presentation. They were just looking for some information. So Mayor Blazer and I met, and I just put together a short presentation, maybe about 20, 30 minutes, discussed the merits of it. Being that I have a lot of familiarity with operations there, I was familiar with the costs of the pool that existed there, was able to make some direct comparisons and demonstrate value. I thought it was a good presentation. We'll see if they are interested in partnering.
Is anybody else, are we talking to anybody else? Any other?
The invitation's been out there for several months. The Ho Chunk Nation has expressed some interest, and Mayor Blazer's office has been communicating with them. To date, we have not been asked to do any type of formal presentation by any of the other municipalities. When we do get questions from residents, we do encourage them to talk to their elected officials from those municipalities, and if we are asked to present, we would be glad to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, we'll go to item number 3, and that's the review of the degradation ordinance.
All right, so last month, we brought forth a proposal for the revision of Chapter 6.24, degradation costs. At that time, we were looking at putting together some potential language to bring forth to approve and submit to council. We have not had, or I have not had time to prepare that, and so in your packet is the same information that was reviewed last month. I guess, you know, what is staff, what we're looking for is if there's, you know, any significant changes to this, it would be more timely, more efficient for us to develop ordinance language in cooperation with the city attorney if we have the same expectations for what we're looking for coming out of it. So I brought this back. You know, it was a little bit of a short notice for some folks last month, so hopefully everyone's had a chance to digest this and review it, and certainly willing to answer any questions or participate in any discussion.
Does anybody have any questions or comments on it, or?
There's a representative,
I'd like to
Water
speak.
and Light.
Oh,
I'd like to speak on this.
okay, Jake. Go ahead, Jake.
All right. So just to go over a little bit of what I went over last month as well, I'm still heavily in favor of this. I think it's a great idea to get additional funds for our roads. When you look at other cities around us, they use our roads far more than we use theirs. And this would go to the ratepayer, but I don't think that's such a bad thing. I mean, when you talk about us being the city of Wisconsin Rapids, people are coming here to shop from out of town. They're using the roads, but the citizens of Rapids are the only ones paying for them right now. So I think this is a great way to even the playing field so that we can get some funds from all those who are using the roads and put it back into our budget. It's really hard to find other means for additional funding for our roads. And if we don't move in this direction, where are we going to go to find those funds? And when people ask us, what are we doing for the roads, which is a common question I get all the time, I'm sure you do as well, this is one way we can say we're moving in the direction of trying to get more funding for that. So I'm in favor of this. Since it's on the floor tonight, I'm going to make a motion that the degradation component of the code be updated. And we'll see where it goes. I don't really need any more information. I think this is where it stands, so I'll leave that with the motion.
So that was a motion, Jake?
Yeah, that was a motion.
I'll second that. Josh, do you have to move this along? Josh, do you have anything you want to comment on tonight?
No, I guess, just like to ask that Water and Light be part of the draft. That's all. I think we can tweak it probably under a pretty good agreement.
Sure.
Okay.
So just because those that might be listening wouldn't have heard Josh, the request was if Water and Light could be a part of the ordinance preparation, and certainly that's not a problem. I think our city utility should be involved in that, and hopefully we'll be able to present a recommendation for the July city council meeting.
Okay. That's the only question I'd have, if we'd have something for the council meeting, or if it'd be next month at the committee meeting, so.
I anticipate we'll have something ready for the council meeting.
Okay.
I'll keep you apprised if for some reason.
Just so we get enough time that we can.
Right, to
look at-
review it.
Look how it's worded and that, so. Okay, item number,
We had a motion on,
oh, that's right, we got to vote. We have a motion and a second to approve drawing up a degradation ordinance. All in favor, committee, respond by aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it, 3-0. Thank you. Item number 4, review request by Jim Geniak to install beam guard in front of his house. There's been a lot of discussion between staff and the Geniaks, and this is a 2nd Avenue and 10th Street project, the corner there, of replacing or not replacing the guardrails that are there. And so, Jim, I don't know if you would want to start off by saying something, or how would you like, to me, it doesn't matter if you want to start with saying something. The recommendation is not to put it, from the staff, is not to put the guardrails back in. So everybody that's listening or watching, whatever, knows, I guess, what we're talking about. Thank you. And so if you want to say something to start with, and then we'll go to staff and go back and forth and see where we are. But this has been, for everybody is watching, that there has been, I think, several meetings between the two parties, and actually all the persons involved, couple been contacted and talked it over, and that with the property owner and with staff and that. So let's see what we do here. Jim?
Yes, sir. Is this where I'm supposed to
Just
Push the
press-
button so the green light should come on.
There, okay. Thank you. I provided you with 2 handouts. One is a narrative, one has photographs. This all began, or a little on the history side. There has been a guardrail in front and alongside of 2nd Avenue and 10th Avenue at the intersection for well over 30 years. I've been told it's 40 years, but 30 is good. The guardrail, or yes, it was probably installed to protect property. It was also installed to protect pedestrians that are on the sidewalk, that are using the sidewalk for a lot of purposes, to include going to school. There's also a creek there. It provided some protection for people to stop going into, or to keep them from going into the creek. In about February of this year, I was informed that the guardrails, a pole, and guy wires were going to come out as they had been deemed a traffic hazard. Sarcastically, I've never heard of a guardrail being a traffic hazard, but I'm not here to debate my sarcasm. There was a report that since 1994 that there were 5 accidents. Only one of those involved the guardrail. The other 4, I have no idea where in the S-curve that there is. And that's an issue. There's an S-curve that comes from the expressway heading east on 2nd Avenue, turns on about a 90-degree angle heading eastbound, or excuse me, on 2nd Avenue heading north, then eastbound, and then another 90-degree approximately curve going to the north on the 1st Avenue. Those curves, or the curve right by us has some vision issues, a couple of which have still not been resolved. As I look out there right now, it appears that the curve is going to be a little sharper than it was before. The guardrails prevented cars from going, or vehicles from going to head north into our house. And the sidewalk. A brief study was conducted, and it was determined that the average speed by the city said that it was 31.5 miles an hour is what the cars were traveling. I was informed that the curbs will stop or disrupt the car going 20 miles an hour when it hits a curb. Well, that's all in good, sir, except that show that the curbs have been removed.
Thanks.
The curbs have been removed, so from a layperson's standpoint, it would appear that all protection for the intersection has been removed. There was some talk about that the guardrails are a traffic hazard, as I've said, but that the concern was for perpendicular hits to the guardrail. There are no perpendicular hits that occurs on those guardrails because of the S curve. It's all glancing hits that the cars bounce off of and keep going. I can count on the guardrails approximately 25 to 28 hits over a period of 26 years or more. Only one of those did the driver of a vehicle call the police, according to the information that was provided me. The guardrail is not a hazard to vehicles. It protects the occupants from a more serious accident, i.e. hitting the house or a pedestrian. And then it was said that it cost the city money to maintain the guardrails. In 26 years that I personally know of, the guardrails were maintained one time. And that was when a tree, one of my trees, fell on them and knocked them down. So there is no cost to the city for maintenance. It's been said that I contradict myself about the guardrails, and I don't contradict myself. It proves the guardrails are needed and not a hazard, no perpendicular hits. We had issues that have partially been resolved in regards to the pole and the guy wires. The pole and the guy wires were also determined to be a traffic hazard. But after several or many talks, it was decided that the pole would remain and the guy wires would be relocated. Just to walk you through real quick, pictures 1 and 2 and 3 show the house in relation to the street and how that the guardrails are situated in the direction of traffic going to come from the expressway. People that come from Port or turn off of the expressway are used to going 40 miles an hour, or probably plus, down into a more restricted speed limit. But I think that we could probably agree that the speed is maintained, so that 20 mile per hour threshold is not there. The pole, pictures 5 and 6, show that the pole is starting to lean now. Prior to the removal of the guy wires, I put a level on the pole, and the bubble on the level was just inside of the two lines. After the guide wires were removed and the special equipment from Board of Water and Light was removed, or that was put there to hold the pole up while some construction was being done, the picture 6 shows the pole is leaning. Now on the level, the bubble doesn't show up in the glass. Picture 10, that was probably the accident that the police were called on just because of the dent. I don't know. You'll note that in picture 11, 12, 13, 14, how poles 11, 12, and 13 was brand new construction within the last 18 months. To include the street sign pole in number 13. 15, 16, and 17 are just objects of a proposal. I'm requesting the guardrails be put in at least 33 feet each direction. It doesn't have to be the full 80 or 90 or 60 to 80 feet going east, 33 feet, 35 feet going from the intersection of 10th and 2nd eastbound would be adequate to protect the sidewalk, the pedestrians, etc. And about the same distance going north on 10th. 15 shows the current style of guardrails. Item 6, or picture 16, shows some boulders. Boulders were brought up in a couple of meetings, and I was flat told I can do anything at my expense on my property. I gave you a picture to contain 2 black rocks. That shows the property line is where the fences, or the fence is, the brown fence. The black rock is on public property in the right-of-way. I can show you a lot more pictures like that. 16 is a alternative to the guardrail, in that boulders could be placed east and north about every 5 feet along the curb line between the sidewalk and the curb, and on 10th alongside the curb. I would maintain and trim the grass and that type of stuff if that was done. Alternative to that, picture 17 shows the guardrail post, just to give you an example of the heights and size of the guardrail post. Posts such as those could be put at the same distance going east on 2nd Avenue and north on 10th Avenue. And again, I would maintain the grass and stuff around those posts. So I'm requesting replace the guardrail. If that should fail, I'm requesting either alternative 1 or 2, which is pictures 16 and 17. Do you have any questions?
I don't. Anybody have a questions for Jim or anything, or? I guess then we'll go to Joel, whichever wants to comment from staff side here.
Sure. So if we need some more clarification, there is a memorandum prepared by the city engineer dated April 8th. I think everybody has seen a copy of that. Given Jim's request, I put together a short bullet point summary just to describe the purpose of Beam Guard so that there's some understanding of its purpose. The purpose of Beam Guard is to protect vehicles from roadside hazards. In this particular case, there is no roadside hazard to protect vehicles from. Therefore, Beam Guard and any other barrier or obstruction is not warranted. The purpose of Beam Guard is not to protect private property, as Mr. Geniak suggests. Mr. Chairperson, as you had mentioned, city staff has spent hours discussing this situation with Mr. Geniak and trying to clarify the purpose of Beam Guard, and we've met on several occasions. The fact is, Beam Guard is a traffic hazard and can cause property damage, injury, or death. When warranted, it needs to be less of a danger to the motoring public than the roadside hazard that it's protecting them from. Another fact is that wherever you have Beam Guard, the propensity to hit the Beam Guard is generally higher than the propensity to hit the hazard. So you have to be very careful in determining where it's appropriate, where it's needed. You know, if it was hit 25 to 28 times, that's 25 to 28 times some vehicle was damaged. So it is a roadside hazard. To understand this a little bit, a clear zone is defined as an unobstructed, traversable roadside area that allows a driver to stop safely or regain control of a vehicle that has left the roadway. Based on DOT and AASHTO design manuals, the clear zone for a speed limit of 30 miles an hour is 7 to 10 feet. Mr. Geniak's house is approximately 52 feet away from the street. As a result, Mr. Geniak's house is not a hazard to motorists. It's not a roadside hazard. There are examples of street geometry similar to Mr. Geniak, such as his neighbors just across the street at 910 2nd Avenue South and at 920 1st Avenue South. Neither of those locations have had Beam Guard. It's not proposed to be installed for the same reasons. Engineering standards such as the Wisconsin DOT Facilities Development Manual and the US DOT Barrier Guide actually warn that barriers should only be used when warranted, and then only if the roadside hazard they are protecting traffic from cannot be altered or eliminated. So the city engineer's report goes into much more detail, but the recommendation, my recommendation concurs with the city engineer's recommendation that the Beam Guard should not be reinstalled because there is no roadside hazard or any other warrant to suggest that the expense and the placement of an obstruction in a clear zone is warranted.
Anybody have any comments, questions, or anything? Just a second. Jake, do you have anything at home? Any question? You still with us?
I do not.
Not right now, okay. Mr. Geniak or Peg? Either one? You want to come forward just for the, because we're on the public access?
Okay. I have two questions. One is, at the corner of our property, there is
Can you speak closer to the mic?
sorry, there's a handicap
Thank you.
part of the sidewalk. that has no curb on it. And people coming down, that's where they're going to hit. The other thing I'd like to talk about is, can we put a stop sign on 2nd Avenue at 10th on the far side of the road? I don't know what side, the opposite side from our house. Would a stop, because that would make people stop and pay attention. I don't know if that's feasible or not.
I don't know if it is or not. Stop sign. Joe? Oh, okay,
So
the other
just-
Joe.
Just to answer the questions, starting with the ADA ramp, that's correct. The ADA ramp was there previously. We're replacing that and putting it back in.
Right.
Similarly, the guardrail that was there was a gap right at the ramp, so pedestrians can get across. So, nothing much has changed there in regards to the ramp. With the stop sign request, stop signs also have warrants that need to be met. So it's a list of criteria that we need to go through and kind of check the boxes that, yes, this meets criteria to put a stop sign in. I'm not sure that would be the case here, but that's the protocol that we would have to go through.
Okay. Okay. Oh, and I can tell you that kids on Friday and Saturday night don't go 30 miles an hour around those curves.
Dean?
Well, actually, what you ended with is, if in fact, and I actually agree with Mr. Jesnick about the chances are they probably aren't going 20 miles an hour on that curves, which possibly would warrant some speed issues, whether we put digital things, whether we try to write tickets there, whether we look at that. And to Joe, I understand the position that these aren't to protect his house, their dwelling. By the same token, they've had it there for a number of years.
Right.
And that's something that they thought it was for.
Sure.
And boulders have been brought up, and it seems if the city's changing what they've had for 30-some years, we might also think about some accommodations. So have we looked into what the price of that boulder option would cost?
So the objective when we're designing projects is to design the projects for motorist safety. And as we've mentioned to the Geniacs, if they wish to put a guardrail on their property, if they feel that their house is in danger, they can certainly put boulders in their yard, they can certainly put beam guard on their own property, they can put posts on their own property. As professional staff responsible for the maintenance of the right-of-way, our objective is to have as little as possible actually in the right-of-way. And so when I see a picture like Mr. Geniac submitted with a boulder out in the street right-of-way near a fence, that's alarming to me. That needs to go away, and the property owner that put it there needs to be either asked to remove it or the city would remove it. If that person wanted to put that on their own private property to protect their house, if they felt that was an issue, they could certainly do that. I think with the 30 years of history that Mr. Geniac has at his house, if you look at the angle of those curves, I mean, there are several other houses that are also on the ends. There's other places in the city where you have a T intersection where there's a house right on the end. And there aren't problems with an errant driver traveling 50 feet off of the road and running into someone's house. That just doesn't happen. If it were to happen, it would be something extremely odd. And so we just don't recommend installing devices that are potential safety risk in the right-of-way, even though this thing's been there for 30 years. I really don't know why it was installed in the first place. I would hope it wasn't an engineering decision, because, you know, the principles and practice of engineering haven't changed a whole lot, and these guides are, you can look back at guides from 20, 30 years ago, and a little bit has changed, but not a whole lot. There's a number of criteria before you would put any type of obstruction in the right-of-way. And again, the big concern here is if it's supposed to protect that house from a car that's heading northbound on 2nd Avenue, this is not a glancing blow. This is a serious, not maybe quite head-on impact, but at least 45 degrees. That curve is probably about 45 degrees, and the one closer to the river is a little tighter than that. Again, that is not what these things are designed for. If there were a cliff off the edge of that, then sure. But when it's 50 feet to a house, and the typical clear zone, and the clear zone is how far it takes, you know, if somebody's driving and it's slippery in the wintertime, and by the time you recognize that I'm sliding here, I need to, and I can't stop, if you do actually bounce over the curb, well, if there's snow there, it's going to stop you sooner than that. But you're not likely, if there is no snow, you're not likely to go more than 10 feet beyond that curb. And with a house 50 feet away, there's no risk unless it is something really crazy. And then you could make that same argument for any house in the city. So I guess it's a long answer to a short question, but we just do not recommend, you know, installing any type of an obstruction in the right-of-way unless it's warranted.
Scott?
First of all, just a comment. We talk about situations throughout the city, like there may be other curves, there may be other situations. But that guide wire, I look throughout the city. I've been working and discussing this with Mr. Gignac because he's in my district. So as an alderman, he called me. And throughout the city, I've seen so many guide wires. You know, like when you buy a new car, and you see all the other cars that same color or same make or what have you. If you look behind Taco John's, there's 7 or 8 guide wires just in that area alone. And I mean, so the idea that should we not replace that guide wire on that pole, well, there's guide wires all over the city. Why not this one? And then if that's the case, well, let's evaluate all the guide wires in the city and eliminate those. That might be a problem. But, so, I mean, you use that analogy like there's no other area, there are other areas in the city with that curve, and why should we do it now? Well, there's all these poles, the guide wires, and why are we eliminating this one? That's my first point. And then it was said, a comment, that was hit 28 times, and so that guardrail becomes a hazard. Well, if it was hit 28 times, a person cutting the lawn, walking along that sidewalk, and the house would be hurt. So it's the idea that who's responsible to be in control of their vehicle, and someone could have been hit 28 times cutting their lawn and killed. The other thing, in point 4, it says that 7 to 8 feet should be clearance, so the house is not a roadside hazard. I don't care if the house is a roadside hazard to a driver. I worry about the driver hitting a pedestrian or hitting someone in that house, or someone cutting their lawn in that house, in that property, and the safety of Jim and his wife and anyone visiting the house. And so I see there's one question I'd like to ask. Presently, there's arrows on those posts in front showing to go right. Those are going to, from my knowledge, those are going to be replaced. And I think I read someplace an oversized sign. What is the oversized sign? I don't know if it has to be oversized. It looks like that's on picture 2, that sign, that arrow looks pretty decent. what are those going to be attached to? Couldn't we put a series of arrows, you know, maybe 3 or 4 arrows going down that road attached to these posts that were in picture 17 or something like that? That would stop a vehicle. And then when you talk about boulders, I think there's 2 issues. I think that would be a compromise. We talk about compromises, and I think there's some frustration that maybe Jim has contacted City Hall, and we've had all these meetings, and he doesn't take no for an answer. The thing is that I think he has a legitimate reason, and I think it needs to come to this committee. We compromised on 3rd Avenue when we were going to cut some trees, and people came over there, and we came up with a conclusion: we'll raise the level of the sidewalk. That was beautiful. The trees were there, and we raised the sidewalk, and it's beautiful. We made compromises on 2nd Street North with the size of lawns and streets and so forth. It seems to me, I'd like to suggest that we make a compromise, and I think, I don't know if the guardrail, it seems, they say you shouldn't put it in there, it doesn't mean they say you can't. You know, it's like what it's used for doesn't mean you can't. But if we don't put a guardrail, why not put low-level boulders? So if a car went up over the curb, it would get stuck underneath the car, and a pedestrian walking their child or what have you on a bicycle wouldn't get hurt. Or if we're going to put these signs that are arrows, and they're attached to something, they're not just free-floating, why can't we attach them low to those posts so that anybody coming down at 3 o'clock in the morning? And the other thing is that in the past, this road wasn't traveled that much. But now we have the senior center, we have the Y, we have the so much more downtown that road is going to get significant, I don't know, but I would suggest twice the amount of traffic that they've had over the years. And so more traffic, that's still a curve. There's still, in my opinion, needs to be some protection for a resident there. And if you're going to put those arrows in, why can't they put on those posts so the driver sees it? And then the doggone thing, what about the responsibility of the driver? I mean, the driver's responsible to be in control of their car. We know that. So why can't we come up with a compromise that would be meeting both sides? That's my feeling. Thanks.
Joe?
Yeah, just a couple comments. On the guy wires, the engineering department on every single construction project does a safety review. And we work with the water and light utility. And if there is a guy wire that's close to an intersection or somewhere that it's identified as a potential hazard, we work with water and light to see, can it be removed? Sometimes it can, sometimes it can't. Yeah. And this situation was one that it could be relocated. And the utility worked with the city to do that.
Joe, if I could add to that real quick. So the primary issue with this particular guy wire was that it was pointing in the direction of oncoming northbound traffic. And there have been issues with vehicles, errant vehicles, they'll literally drive right up those wires. And so comparing other locations and other guy wires, there are a lot of guy wires, but they don't all point in the direction of oncoming traffic. So there's a particular issue with this one guy wire in the safety review that we were doing for this one project.
So I guess your other comment was about, 28 times someone could have gotten hurt mowing their lawn.
Yeah.
We just don't have any accident data to suggest that is anything but wild speculation, because there's 2 other homes, within a couple hundred feet that don't have guardrail, and there's never been an issue, right? I mean, we've got a whole city, and if we had a problem with cars leaving the road, I mean, 3rd Avenue has a whole number of curves up by the Centralia Center, and there just aren't problems. And so
What about the sign, the arrow?
So the arrow signs is something that we've proposed with the project, just to, similar to what's there now. I don't know, did you have a size change in mind?
There's the manual that we have, the federal manual that we follow, that's included in the city ordinance. It identifies what an enlarged sign would be. There's standard sizes, and then there's an enlarged size. And when we did our safety review, we were looking for improvement options, so that we're proposing to remove the guardrail because we can't warrant it. But if there are concerns, if there are some issues, if there is some improvements that could be made with the larger signs, increased visibility to oncoming traffic, it wouldn't hurt. And so that's what we were considering. Also, the new signs would probably have additional reflectivity, which would add to the visibility.
I just want to finish my comment, though, by suggesting that, these manuals are federal manuals. These have been designed by, nationwide experts. And I would really hope that we wouldn't make knee-jerk decisions on design principles and practices. Mr. Geniak feels that he's in danger, and that's his feeling, and that's his opinion. I'm not going to discredit that. That's how he feels about it. He's an honest man. And there's speculation about how vehicles may behave, how traffic may increase, and but the fact is that there are years of design and countless hours of expertise that goes into developing these principles and practice, and that's why anytime you're going to put a guardrail or other type of barrier in the right-of-way, it's a last resort. And it's described thoroughly in here why it's a last resort, because it is a hazard. I know when we were looking at some examples just recently, someone ran into a end treatment on a guardrail, the car slid sideways. And the car's not designed to do that, and they're looking at potentially redesigning some of these things, but they went right through the car, cut the people in half. They are a roadside hazard. And if you need them, you put them in, and if you don't, they really, we just don't want to be installing, rocks or things like that if somebody's in a car or on a motorcycle or on a bicycle and goes off the road and hits one of these things, and we allow it. There's a problem there, because it violates the design criteria that roads are built with all over the country.
Scott?
I respect, you know your business, okay? I'm not trying to argue it. But as I got involved with this, I looked up breakaway posts, poles, where they have the pole coming up and they have on the ground, and they have bolts, and then they have the pole. And when it's hit, it's a breakaway. It'll surely wake up the driver, but it's a breakaway. And I'm thinking, with regard to these arrows, why can't we or on posts, why can't we put those in so they're bright? For example, you said more illumination, so it would give some protection for Jim and his wife out there, or a pedestrian. It just seems. And then with regard to the guardrail, guard wires, I won't get into debate about that, but I've seen some that are in the same direction as you're driving, to be honest.
Sure.
Like I say, you see a couple right behind Taco John's in that area. But I think the more important issue right now we're talking about is the guardrail and some protection there. And it seems like there should be some compromise that's reasonable. I don't know why, rather than it's the city's way or the highway, type of thing. And I think, as we've done in other situations, like I said, there's the breakaway poles that we could attach those arrows to. There's other things that if we could be creative and meet Jim's needs and his wife's needs,
Jim, just a second. Joel? Yeah.
Just to kind of close out some of the comments that you had made, Mr. Kellogg. It's been a pleasure working with Jim on this and trying to help address his concerns and work with him. Certainly, the engineering department isn't out to make it difficult. I mean, we're trying to use proper design protocols on all of our the road reconstruction projects that we do for the city. And safety is of the highest importance. In working with Jim and with everybody that's been at the meetings, one of the compromises is that we move the guardrail back behind the sidewalk off of the public right-of-way. That's a way for, as a professional engineer, we've met our requirements, and the property owner can be satisfied on their end as well.
Jim?
Thank you, sir. I have numerous photos of very recent construction that shows the same thing that's in pictures 11, 12, 13, and 14, where that the new cement has been poured around the electric poles. In fact, sidewalks have been deviated so they can go around the pole that was left right at the curb. This whole thing began with me in January of this year, when I was told that the guide wires were going to be removed. At that discussion, I asked why, and it was told to me it was not aesthetically pleasing for the work that is being done on 2nd Avenue. Then, after that, came in March and April about safety. It wasn't safety to start. It didn't match what they were trying to do out in the street. They talk about the curve there. Yes, there's an S curve. It's a sharp S curve. It's not a 45, it's closer to a 90. And it has been made more severe with the new construction. Under national guidelines, the city had a chance to correct that curve when they did the construction to alleviate some of the curve, not all of the curve, but some of the curve. The line of vision is still an issue, and if they're talking about a safety hazard, that's there. But then, in this national standard, guardrails that have a history of severe runoff collisions or a significant potential for such collisions. Guardrail is warranted if a combination of the following site-specific conditions is deemed to create a significant probability of runoff road issues. Roadway alignment, presence of curves, such as the first curve in a series of curves, there's 2 curves there, in a series of curves, successive curves with significant speed changes between curves, curves that are sharper than those generally used, and compound curves. This intersection fits that national guideline. It also states that climate conditions, icy conditions, that type of stuff, high velocity of traffic, also play into it. The hits on the guardrails prove that they work, and they did not cause serious injury. None of the hits were EMS dispatched to. So the traffic safety fallacy is just that. It's a fallacy. They're striking hits. And the number of vehicles are definitely increasing now that the Y and the Boys Club is open. And now that the pandemic stuff is being lifted, the traffic is more. The guardrails were there for a reason. The city engineers over the history of the town, going back pre-Joe Terry, have all concluded the guardrails were warranted there. It's not an aesthetic problem, and it's not a traffic hazard problem that the guardrails cause. The guardrails are there to prevent a hazard. Thank you.
Joe, where would arrows be put up if something like that was done? Where it's being
Similar
looked
to
at?
the locations that they're at today. You put them in the line of sight on the oncoming traffic, directly in front of the lane that they're traveling in, if you can, or as close as possible to that alignment.
So it'd be on the boulevard,
Yeah,
on
it'd be
Jim's or the boulevard in front of his property?
adjacent to his property, yeah, between the curb and gutter and the sidewalk.
And would that be more than one arrow?
Just one.
Just one, okay. So I think, Scott, what you were alluding to, that'd be
Yeah, could,
more than one. And
I've seen
I just
where-
wanted to clarify that.
I've seen on some curves where they have the series. Couldn't we put like 2 or 3?
They'd be smaller arrows, more like they call them a chevron type arrow. We've used signs like that on First Street North, coming southbound from Buren, adjacent to the river. No, there was guardrail that was warranted for that location because of the river hazard. But then we were able to utilize the continual radius of that curve to mount smaller arrow signs. This location would be somewhat difficult for northbound traffic because of the intersection with 10th Avenue, that there wouldn't be, for more than 50% of the curve, you wouldn't have a space to put the arrows.
I don't understand that. So could you put like 3 long arrows there?
I mean, you might be able to put one on the west side, so for northbound traffic, heading north away from the expressway, on the west side of 10th, and you'd be able to put one in its current location adjacent to Jim's property. I don't know that you'd be able to put 3 in, or that there would be a benefit of 3.
Well, in picture number 2, if you had one there plus 2 more, or 3, maybe with post, maybe a post between them. And if you're concerned about the driver and hazard, can it be a breakaway? Again, I'm not an
Sure.
expert.
Yes.
got it up on internet, but
So the perspective in picture 2 is from the curb line, and so the vehicle, the driver would be positioned almost 16 feet out from that location. And so the alignment is a little bit, the perspective in the picture is a little bit different, but
number one would show it straight on.
right. I mean, we can look at it further.
See, like I have been involved in talking to Jim, I guess the thing is, it goes back to the idea to sit down and look at things further, to see what would be a viable option, and compromise like we've done in all the other locations. And to have like 2 or 3 arrows, it's more advantageous for the driver. It meets Jim's needs and his wife's needs, and pedestrian needs and so forth. So it's like the idea, why not? And just sit down with the two of them and come up with something, plan A, plan B, but now knowing, and you know what their concerns are, meet their needs.
We can definitely look at it. I'll just point out a couple of things that we need to consider with the placement of the signs and the size of the signs, is that signs in the right-of-way also obstruct vision. So depending on the size and location, are they blocking pedestrians from being seen by the vehicles? Are they blocking the vision from drivers as they're approaching the intersection to make sure that they can see oncoming traffic and approaching traffic? So those would be some of the factors that we'd be considering when looking at finding locations and how many could fit.
And if we could do that and then look at a stop sign, and I know you said there's a checklist and things, but it may meet those needs too. But I don't know, it just seems to be able to do that would be a way to go.
Well, we're at the point where actually the project will be coming to completion
Right.
shortly. So it's to make a decision on what to do and what not to do. I totally understand Geniacs, for as long as they've lived there, those guardrails have been there. I don't know when they were put in myself either. So I do understand that they've been there. It's, I think I don't know if we have to put them back like they are now, but I think there's a couple things, I guess, maybe if it could be looked at, and one could be a stop sign to see if it meets the warrants. One would be what we could do with arrows, if anything could be added with that. But otherwise, you know, other than the boulevard's right by the street, so that's anywhere a boulevard is. At some point, you know, the person driving the vehicle has to be in charge of what they're doing. And, you know, with the arrow there, to me, that definitely means the curve's coming up, I guess. And if I had never driven on that road before, I'd really be leery about what's coming up when I see a big arrow sitting in front of me. And I've driven that for many years. But I do understand the S-curve part of it and that, and so I do have sympathy and that with the Geniacs. I'd like to, if there's something else we could do, I would be willing to look at that, but put it back like it was, I don't know about that. And understand where staff's coming from, what the manual says and that, of what to go by. And to start making exceptions to that can just get on more of a slippery road of what you have to do down the road in other projects, so. So I was hoping we could come up to some resolution tonight of what to do. Staff has a recommendation. The Geniacs have what they'd like to see done, and I guess I just, to start this off with, I just had if there is something that could be looked at, and then Joe, you mentioned about sight vision and that, if you start putting too many arrows up, so that'll all have to be looked at too. Because at first, when the arrows were, so I was catching what you were saying, Scott, it'd be a number of them, arrows. Which I first thought maybe that could be something we could talk about, but then again, it'd be the, line of sight that we'd be cutting off from the motoring public or people walking on the sidewalk even too, looking out. Okay, Dean, did you have something?
I could make a motion on basically on what Joe had said and what everybody said, and you could take a listen to it. I actually would move to look at the signs, and you would, Joe, excuse me, to amend this motion, you said maybe on the 10th Avenue side, and then another one, like kind of where it is now, would be something that would make sense to you?
It's possible. We definitely want to look at it closely and make sure there weren't any other issues with that.
Well, I'll at least put something out there then. I'd like to move that we look into possible 2 signs, one on the left side, one on the right in the current location, under the restrictions that engineering takes a look at it based on the manual, and move forward with that as a compromise motion.
I'll second that to move this along here. Jake, do you have anything to add in or anything? Questions?
Do not.
Okay. The motion is to look at installing 2 arrows, possibly, or what could be come up with, Joe?
So let me try to read this back and
Okay,
see if
okay.
that covers what you're trying to accomplish. Motion to consider additional signs to highlight the curve in accordance with design standards. Motion by Veneman, second by Rayom.
That's perfect.
Okay.
Like that?
Yep.
That's perfect.
Yep.
That's what I was trying to say.
Question?
One more question from Scott here.
I'd like to look at the stop sign. I think you said the 2 arrows. But explore other things too. I mean, if there's an extra pole or post that could go down, or breakaway post that could go down. I mean, we've heard all this discussion. I don't know if one sign is going to be, in my opinion, meeting a Gigna's needs, or a driver's needs, or a pedestrian walking there's needs. So I think, I don't know what we talk about a sign, I don't know what the sign looks like, sounds like. I don't know if there can be 2 there in front. And you talk about the height of it, maybe it's lower so you can see a pedestrian walking. Then you talk about maybe there's a child, I don't know. But I like to explore rather than saying 2 signs, to say signs and additional items that may be addressing the needs of not in the motion, the Gigniacs in a sense. So, I don't know, but rather than just say those 2 things,
I could amend.
Can I speak?
Go ahead, Jake.
Jake?
Thanks, guys. So my opinion on this, and it's no offense to the Geniacs, but I don't like when we stray from a manual or what we're doing across the entire city for one-off situations. I felt this way about the sidewalks on the west side there when that was an issue not too long ago, and I feel the same here. I think we really got to stay uniform. We're putting ourselves in situations where when we break from that, we're stuck in situations like this where we're debating about whether we're going to go one-off in a certain part of the city and not do that in the other part. So I'm with the city staff on this and the recommendation. That's where I stand on the issue.
Okay, thanks, Jake. Nothing else here, committee, then we'll vote on the, Joe, you want to just read that quick again?
Sure. Motion by Veneman, second by Rayom, to consider additional signs to highlight the curve in accordance with design standards.
Okay, committee, all those in favor of the motion respond by aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, 2-1 in favor. With that, then, we'll go to item on our agenda, item 5, and that's the referral list. To review it. Somewhere I got it here.
So we do have an additional item on the referral list, and thankfully he's here tonight. Request by Alderperson Veneman to review the 18th Avenue project design and assessments. Was there anything more descriptive of that? Is it the assessments or the design, or what was the?
There was a petition submitted to research the special assessments by some of the 18th Avenue residents, and they basically put together a group of people that would like to speak and first find out where we're at on our study about special assessments and talking about how it relates, how, based on the economy, I think they just want to talk a little bit about what they think about the special assessments. They now are clear on what's getting sidewalks and what wasn't. That was originally part of it. So they would like to speak about special assessments and how it relates to them and how they'd like to get there in front of us. And so we've talked about them. I've talked to Tom about getting them, having, whether it be a special meeting or moving it to the next Public Works meeting, of getting 1 or 2 people here to address their needs, whether it be via Zoom or.
So, and I don't have it on here, but we have been working for the past several months. The engineering department has been doing research and is in the process of developing a report. And again, it's obviously the committee's purview there, but I think it would be maybe a little premature to get a bunch of input on assessments until we get that report in front of us. And then that's all going to make sense as far as, you know, being able to look at options, what options maybe are legal options, what options might there be, and for everybody then to be able to provide some input, you know, back to the committee and to have that discussion then at a following meeting, because I don't think you're going to make a decision on something as big as assessments and the value of it in the period of a month or two. So
No, but that is one of the questions, is how we are coming on that study, because we've been talking about that.
yeah, so we're
Pretty much every month.
We're getting pretty close. There is still a little bit of information that we are attempting to get from the city assessor. They're working with staff on that. You know, we had expected to have something to council a little bit sooner, but quite frankly, we had, one of the engineering department members had a serious health condition and was absent for quite a while. And as I mentioned earlier, we're still absent a design engineer. So not only is staff trying to accomplish these types of studies, there's a few speed studies, stop sign studies, follow up on Chestnut once things get going there, but they're also trying to get the construction projects done well and then design for next year. And we are probably just about 12 months behind on that. The projects for next year we have underway, but we like them on the shelf in August so that we've got lots of time through the budget process. So I will say that that department is diligently working on projects, but that's the reason why we're a little bit delayed in having that report complete. So, but it will be soon. I would suspect that we'll have it for next month, and I can keep everybody posted on that. As soon as we have a full staff review to the point where we feel that it's prepared and ready to be submitted to the alderpersons, you know, we'll get it out there even prior to, or maybe well prior to a meeting, but
Okay.
as soon as we can.
I'll talk to them. Thanks.
Thanks. Scott?
We have on there large refuse pickup, and I've been hearing, I have had several calls. I thought it was going to be on this month, but if it could be on next month. I've called different cities, and everybody has a different program, and everybody are in the situation, same situation. I think we just have to see what we can do within our costs and our ability to do it. But I think it's an important item, because if we don't pick up these large, there's items on the side of homes and the back of homes, and eventually you're going to find those items in the river, in the fields, and we're going to say, what's happened? So I think it's a priority, and maybe we can't decide on next month, but maybe at least have it on the agenda, because I think it's something that we need to start before it gets to be a problem. So,
Okay. I'll see what we can come up with, and hopefully we can have something at least to discuss at next month's meeting, and point us in a direction to go or what to look at, but I think everybody keep it, one thing with all of this type of stuff in the situation that we're in is it's manpower and vehicles and whatnot, so I mean, everything that have to be looked at of what could be done, and where I'm all in favor of looking at it and what we could do if there would be something, but we don't make sure we don't take away from something else to accomplish something, we ain't giving up something to get something, so how we can work together if it can be done, so hopefully next month we could have something, at least discussion on it. Anybody else have anything to add to the list? Our list is only, I guess, 9, and actually took item 7 would go off. That's with the beam guard. And that's, I think, the only one that actually to take off then. And with that, then we'd be to item number, who knows where? Too many papers here. I think we're down to the end. Item number 6, that's adjournment. Also, got a motion by Dean to adjourn. I'll second that. Committee, all in favor, respond by aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the ayes have it, 3-0. The meeting's adjourned at 8:18 p.m. Thank you, everybody.